For our last conversation of the day, please welcome Joshua Michael Johnson of IMDF, who's actually traveled quite a ways to be here with us this afternoon, and he'll be joined by Steve Clemens of The Hill.
Steve Clemens still with The Hill. I see some people leaving. You shouldn't leave. You could have been in the final group. There's going to be a trophy given to the... No, I'm just joking. For those of you who have stayed all day with us, thank you so much. How many are... And you're still here, that's great. I didn't scare you off. Has anybody watched Godzilla? You've seen the Godzilla movie? Anybody raise your hand? Yeah, you've seen. Andrew, of course, has. And Seema has. Well, you're not going to get this if you haven't seen Godzilla is refreshed with the nuclear blast, and I'm refreshed with a Coke Zero. So that's the end of the day joke. So, Joshua, we met in Monte Carlo. That's a humble brag here today, but we did meet in a healthcare forum talking about the future of healthcare, but we were in a very different environment. And you chatted with me about blockchain and 3D printing of drugs in rural villages in Beijing, and how we could think more broadly about things from like clinical trials and information that would create enormous benefits and create bank shots for changing some of the vectors that we've been talking about all day. Yeah. And so I'd like to know, you're a co-architect of a blockchain related company foundation in China, IMDF. You might tell people what that stands for. But I'd like to know what the future really looks like and why you think blockchain is a key part of it.
Okay. Thank you guys for having me. It's IMDB. IMDF is International Medical Digitalization Foundation. And basically it uses the blockchain technology to track and trace pharmaceuticals in China. So we see the transparency in the data as a key theme today, as a common theme from what I'm hearing from the people up here, is data and transparency and security as well. And the good thing about blockchain, it does all three.
China and transparency don't tend to go together for me. Right. So are you changing that? Is blockchain forcing Chinese authorities and businesses to be more transparent?
The ledger basically allows, even if the central government has all access, you can have level 5 or 6 access depending on how much you pay or the level of clearance that you have. So it just by default, it allows like an Excel spreadsheet, if it's color coded in 10 colors, okay, you can see this color, you can see that, or you can't see that. So the transparent as it can be or it wants to be.
I have no clearance, I have no access, I have no color codes, but I believe you. But when you think about the broad side of revolutionizing the way, say, U.S. pharmaceutical firms are dealing with either supply chain or dealing with this question of clinical trials we were talking about, why is that platform so compelling?
Well, I think it helps lower costs by creating an efficiency of data as a data exchange, by having a central ledger and basically just moving, almost like casino poker chips representing money. It basically helps fund that movement of chemicals to create a compound, to create a pharmaceutical, put that in the supply chain, and people use it, and then having that data feedback to create more drugs. Mm-hmm. I think that cycle of even understanding regulatory bodies to see that data as very important, we lower costs dramatically.
Have there been any firms so far that have been using this platform in China?
Yes, Rinha is the first publicly traded company. That's the only one on record, we can say. There's 5 others publicly traded that are using it. And so this is the first phase that right now we're using it. This is the first of its kind in blockchain. It's kind of like Nigeria skipping landlines and going directly to mobile. The ERP systems are very fragmented in China and the pharmas. So by going to this, and I think it jumpstarts a lot of innovation and efficiencies.
So, and this is another area I don't know, because I know that you've been interacting with the Chinese FDA or the equivalent of the FDA over there and thinking about what their ecosystem is. Is there, I mean, we had Scott Koenig here today of Medgenics and others talking about their work with China, but is their clinical trial base connected to ours? Are we able to learn from them on things like cancer and various therapies there, or right. Are we largely disconnected from that?
It's largely disconnected, but I see it as kind of like two Ford Mustangs. If you have one and I have one, there's no national security if we both share when we both turn on our heat or AC, right? So sharing level 2 access of data, we can still learn a lot. And there isn't a national breach of security by sharing that information. So I think that there's still with blockchain technology, not that it's a one size fits all. There's other technologies that will help that innovation. But I think that you can start to share some things that will help kind of jumpstart baby steps.
What are as you look into it, and you've heard today's conversation, I know you've been here since this morning, what are the most immediate things you see for the ecosystem in the United States could benefit, dramatically in this?
Well, I think we have to prove it over there first, because the system here politically, in terms of innovation and technology, I think a lot of DC actually slows it down for innovation. So we're going to have to kind of leapfrog a lot and actually show that it's possible. I think that's going to have to be the case in telemedicine and 3D printing of drugs and other things, that we're going to have to show that there's so much exponential change happening that we can't help but actually put legislation behind it.
I was impressed when you were talking about 3D printing of drugs, which I hadn't thought about 3D printing of molecules, what we were hearing about biologics. And I guess in a socialized system or even a communist system, you can imagine that. I don't know what the ramifications are when you don't have that. But what are the implications as you think, some of the participants today deal with rural health care, right, and they're worried about a health divide inside the United States, in which urban centers with more and more talent, more and more sensors, more and more everything are outpacing and leaving behind rural areas. So, I'm wondering if there's a metaphor, an analogy there with some of the divides that exist in China.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot, and 6 years ago is in telemedicine in China, and we had the largest database of any telemedicine company in the world. And I think that just by sheer scale and data proving what's possible, I think that's just going to happen in China. And then we can prove that into other parts of remote villages in Africa, and other foundations can get involved, et cetera, exponentially lowering the cost of everything. But in real time, if you're just basing it off each chemical compound, and then instead of having to have a pharmaceutical conglomerate behind assembling that, and you're doing it in real time, you can actually find the cure and find it directly and understand where the need is. And that can go into understanding the body in real time. And that, I think, is going to play a big part in it.
What do you mean understanding the body in real time?
So being able to scan the body in real time. So understanding those biomarkers and placing certain things like a clear, let's say, a clear tattoo on you to understand what's in the blood in real time. So if you have something, a blood-related illness in the past, I know I can understand these 22 biomarkers that are going to be preventative if you need to live 20 years longer. So those reactions then become proactive.
If you're in China and doing this same seminar, the same forum over there, do the people in China understand what you're talking about in blockchain?
Well, blockchain has, I think, a base layer for understanding certain things and what's possible. So understanding like what makes the internet, like DARPA started the internet, TCP/IP, and understanding that is going to be taking that and fully decentralizing what information, the flow of information. I mean, I see information like the internet is just a supply chain of data transferring, right? So when we see blockchain and what the future holds, that information will exponentially grow. And just what 5G will do to IoT, you have 1,000 times faster. So 1,000 different data points more will be in your daily life for you to learn from it. And then that will be connected online, just in the way you go to www.whatever.
So this is a lot like what Steve Papermaster was talking about.
Right,
today.
yes. And I support Steve very much, and an advisor on that side. So using blockchain and other technologies to help make that data possible transparently and have that exchange of data in real time.
So before I go to the audience, who hopefully understand blockchain better than I do, what are the downsides of this? So when I think about ledgers, and I understand what you said, sometimes there's top access and different access, and people can see different things, and so you can achieve security at some level. But I guess I have a deep sort of original American distrust of government, right? And having too much information and particularly when you add countries like China or other illiberal regimes. My question is, once your medical data and all of these things about you are digitized and in some sort of permanent columns, is there a risk there? I mean, I just,
Of course, yeah.
Orwell just thumps in my head at that level.
I think it's more actually secure in a way that if we start to prove that money and the transfer of money is actually more secure using blockchain technology than I think the medical health records. So if you just picture a dollar bill and I send it, and I only have those private keys to unlock that, and I shatter it in a million pieces, and then I accept it on the other end, and that's why actually sending a Bitcoin takes so long, because it takes so long to assemble. But I only have those private keys to unlock that. When you have a centralized database, you send that dollar, you intercept that dollar, you can still spend that dollar. But in blockchain, you intercept that, you can't spin a fragment of that. So that, whether it be a dollar bill or your health records, you get to see that in a different way that I personally think it's more secure. Of course, anything, the horse and buggy went to a car, and we started thinking about the future of self-driving cars 50 years ago, then of course that wouldn't be a smart move. But I think it goes in increments.
I see. Interesting. Well, let me go to the audience for those who... Any questions for Michael Joshua Johnson? China, blockchain. My friend, you have a question. You can ask him anything. We can talk about Godzilla. We're right at the end. No last questions or comments. I hope you guys have all enjoyed the day. I want to thank Michael Joshua Johnson for flying all the way from Beijing to share with us a little bit about this, because I do think that as we think about the future, I think this notion of how you reach rural and far off places with complex drugs, number one, super important. I think, building equity and connection between people too. Two, I've been enough places already that I think blockchain does create a different kind of clarity and set of opportunities. And three, I applaud what you're doing with the Chinese FDA, because if you can help those standards evolve in such a way in which you're not just doing clinical trials with limited groups or even rare diseases, which we've been talking about in certain areas with certain communities. If you can connect these data sets across the board, particularly in that, you can create greater economies of scale that are beneficial to people, I think, more broadly and globally. And I worry a little bit about the world pulling apart right now and not looking at the opportunities. So I applaud you, and I thank you very much for doing that.
Exponential.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Johnson, thank you so much.